This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite... Alright, give it a rest. All Access membership is available for $150 off at the moment up till Christmas Eve if you're looking for an opportunity to get in at that. So $99 for access to all of the TrueFire stuff for a year. Pretty good deal. Okay, so I wanted to try a plethora for a plethora of reasons, and for a while, I got my first opportunity. I saw online that this one had come up on eBay. I put in an offer for £260 for this. Now, I've done an initial video with it, and I think I had to say in that video, in my honest kind of opinion, some of what I was hearing, I was a little bit underwhelmed by. I think that's okay in general, but I think maybe the take is not fully formed yet, and I've had some more time to sort of digest it and listen to it, and so I kind of wanted to revisit and start kind of incorporating the TC in a couple of different manners and see what my opinion, it kind of has changed. So sometimes I've been really blown away by what a pedal can do in isolation, and then you think about, like, would that ever actually end up on a pedal board? Would I ever actually use any of these features live? And I think there is definitely a distinction between things that sound cool and things that might be really inspiring and then would actually use on a gig. So for me, that's two different sides of a coin. And Alec Bourne, who has been, you know, banging on to me about the Plethora for a while and is a big fan of it, kind of did a response video where he's like, I actually thought like some of this sounded better than usual, and like what was going on here. Sometimes something simpler that doesn't sound sort of crazy all the time might be more useful. You know, like I've really loved some of the tones that I've heard from a Strymon Big Sky, or some of the more outrageous effects in the Helix. And then when it comes time to gig, what do I use? I just use a dual delay, and I use the Deluxe Reverb sometimes, but I'm not using the more out there effects oftentimes. And so when it comes to the TC Electronics, what it does do really well is kind of these conservative effects, right? So things like the flashback delay, I think there's a lot of pros that have them on the board. The Hall of Fame, you know, if Robin Ford's happy with the Hall of Fame, why can't I be? So I kind of took that on board, what Alec was saying, and then tried it in front of my Deluxe Reverb, which is, I think, what you're hearing in this video, and was really impressed. And even looking back at the initial video I did with it, although I wasn't necessarily blown away in the moment, they actually, the delays and reverbs in there, for example, I think sound really good. And with the editor are tweakable enough that you could do some really powerful stuff with it. So in this video, here's the board that I was using in the intro. So here I've got a freezing delay, so that was what I was doing, the freeze. Got the looper, which actually I really rate this for, you know, it's a ditto, but that animation is super helpful. Then I've got another secondary delay. So this one here kills the input to that block, which is kind of handy, so I can then freeze that and continue playing. Because I've got 5 blocks, I can then just add a different delay. So I think this one was based on the Echo Plex. So some of the tone prints do, of course, sound really good. Then I was thinking, what about something like a blooper Chase Bliss that can kind of sound a bit tapey? What about a shaker vibrato? And then into a reverb, and then the reverb, as I mash it, I went into the editor and sort of saved a preset, so that kind of then chucks the delay and mix up a bit. You really do need the editor, I think, to get into some of the more cool stuff that the Plethora can do, which is kind of a shame in some ways. It's also a little bit confusing. Anyway, so I think instead of thinking about it as a traditional pedal board, this is the way that I'm thinking about it, is that you basically got your tone prints. Board itself, you're kind of just moving tone prints around and making like an EXP assignment. And then really what we're doing is just sorting tone prints, basically. It's a bit of a strange thing, but for instance, like this pedal board that I've got here, you could get in and you can edit tone prints, or like your own tone prints. I've got like this JC Mash Freeze. You could add descriptions of it, that's quite cool. So this is what I was using where, oh, there you go, you can see it now. Can you see it? Yes! Right, so this is how I created the freeze. You have the delayed feedback here, so our default is like 35%. And then as you mash, it goes to 100. But at the same time, the input level to the effect comes down from wherever it's at. So it can freeze. So that's, I think, quite cool. That's how I'm starting to think about how this would be useful, right? So you're creating your own sort of user library of tones, or like pedal effects that you would use often. You could even set up some expression assignments, and then you're kind of putting them together in terms of your boards and then organizing here. And then MIDI is another aspect which I've not investigated yet, but I think it's quite capable MIDI wise. That actually, you know, in terms of some managing tone prints in a multi-effect way, is quite powerful. It's not preset stuff, basically. Like, your whole effects board is not really manageable in preset fashion like it would be in Fractal or HX Effects. It's more like combinations of your tone prints. It's just what I had to kind of get my head around. So building sort of presets is more about kind of figuring out, right, what tone prints are going to do what, and you manage those at the tone print level. So like JC Freeze on one pedal, like that's my tone print which I can move anywhere, or my specific reverb that I've tweaked to then have a mash which extends the mix and decay, like that becomes another tone print that I can move into other boards. But actually managing at a board level is not really a thing. You can just create another board. So I think actually this is a pretty underrated, like I don't hear tons of people talk about them. I could see totally why someone might really get into this, because I've not had to read too much in terms of manuals. I've not had to think too hard about tweaking. The editor, once you first get into the mash thing, is a little bit not super confusing, but not super straightforward either. And I think Pedal Platform, the YouTube channel, is a really good resource, Felipe, if you're looking for good tips on how to use some of this stuff. But it's kind of a lot of what you might need for a gig is in here. It's gonna handle modulation, delay and reverb very handily, and a great looper in there. If you've got some drives and stuff to pair alongside this, I think you could have basically anything you might need for a gig. I think to be able to grab that for like £260 used, I think it's pretty impressive, particularly if you were someone who had like the Alter Ego X4 on your board, or you had the Flashback on your board, or the Hall of Fame Reverb. I think TT Electronics, I want to do another video on this because I've just ordered something that's sitting there, are handling like these really functional things that maybe don't do anything super flashy necessarily, or that's going to sound outrageous out of context, like some of the Strymon or Walrus Audio stuff, but actually really functional, gig-worthy, gig-ready gear. And that's probably why, you know, so many pros end up with a Hall of Fame, a Sub and Up Octava, or, you know, a Flashback on their boards, right? It's got to be. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I wish there was like a more clear sort of manual, and there are some things that I would change about it, but in general, I think it's a really pretty capable unit, and maybe something that is going to worm its way into my life in other ways. Particularly, you know, if I just wanted to take one board with an amp and just have a bit of fun, the Plethora is not a bad choice at all.